Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. We're glad to be with you. We're going to be talking in this segment about the North Dakota Native American essential understandings. And we're really excited to share that with you a little bit.
We've been working on this project now for about 7 years. Well, probably since about 2014, 15.
That's right.
And it's really been an exciting project. It's been sort of grassroots, organically growing due to interest around the state, the interest of the elders, and it's just been a really exciting part of Indian education in North Dakota.
And the whole idea of really transforming education by taking into account the wisdom and the teachings and the stories of the indigenous elders of the area is that I think it's it's groundbreaking. Not that we're the first ones to have done it, but it's exciting because as a person who's dedicated his life to trying to transform education, I like to do that. I think this is one of the things that's making a lot of change that's really positive for our students.
Just so you know a little bit about who we are, I'm Sharla Steever, and I'm a learning specialist at TIE, which is Technology and Innovation in Education, and we're based out of Rapid City, South Dakota. And Scott and I have been partnered on this work now in South Dakota and North Dakota for the last almost 11 years. I think it's getting to be 11 years now. And my background is in elementary education. I taught in Hill City for many years. I'm married. I have a couple adult children, a couple dogs, and we like to share that because I think it's important that we talk about who we are as much as what we do.
That sounds like something we learned from some elders.
I think so.
So I'm Scott, and Scott Simpson. I started out my career teaching high school and middle school, mostly language arts, and then moved into higher ed and worked with teacher training, teacher preparation at several different universities. And for the last nearly 14 years now, I've been at TIE, and 11 of those working directly with Sharla on this work. Have a wife. I live in Spearfish. I have 2 adult daughters. Both of them live here in Spearfish as well, and 1 grandson named Fox, and 4 dogs.
4 dogs.
So we are dog people.
Busy.
Yeah, that's right. They all keep me busy. Yeah. So
I think it's really important to know too a little bit about why we do this work. And who we are and what our role in this work has been, because I think it can be a little confusing sometimes to see a couple people who are not indigenous to this place working in this so closely.
Right.
And so, one of the things that I think is important about the story is that, in South Dakota, we were invited in once the essential understandings were written. The elders there wanted to make sure that the work that they had done, the beautiful document that they had created, got out into schools and was being used. And that's where we came in. We really are the partners who work on getting this into schools, working with teachers about how to teach, and how to go about bringing this in a good way. And so then in North Dakota, we were actually involved from the very beginning with writing the essential understandings. We facilitated the group of elders who did that writing, and then we've been working with them and alongside them and with Lucy Fredericks at the Department of Public Instruction for all of these years, trying to work towards getting it out into schools so that teachers can be using it, creating resources, doing trainings, and a variety of other things. And that's what this is today, is just to give you sort of an overview of this very important work.
And I think being able to facilitate the writing of the North Dakota Native American Essential Understandings was really helpful to us. I mean, we've been working with Essential Understandings in South Dakota for a while, but seeing the elders share stories, figure out what are the important themes, what are the things that we really want our children and grandchildren to know about themselves and that we want our neighbors to know about us. Watching them in that process was really, really eye-opening and helped us, I think, in all other aspects of the work that we've been doing.
Very much
so. That's what we're going to jump right into, and we'll be sharing some images from the document on the screen for you as we go along. All of this information, the document, and lots and lots of interviews with elders you can find on teachingsofourElders.org, the website that is the home for all of this work.
So as we go through our essential understandings, there are 7 of them. And what we'd like to do in this video, in this opportunity to share with you, is mostly just to give voice to those so that you hear what they are. We'll talk a little bit about the fact that they are in some categories, and just give you kind of a really quick look at what they are, so that as you hear about them, as you're working with them or hear people talking about them, you know what they're referencing.
And near the end, we're going to let you hear one of those elders, listen to one of the elder interviews connected with one of the essential understandings, look at some questions that are available for all of those interview clips, just so you kind of know what resources are available when you get to the website. So if you'll take a look at this is a graphic that really came out of conversations with the elders, trying to figure out how these 7 that they had identified, how they fit together. And we have created this graphic, but also color-coded the essential understanding. So the first one, number 1, is color-coded yellow, and it is about sacred relatives and how we relate to everything.
The second one is about learning and storytelling. And this one I find really important, because one of the things that we have learned as we've worked with elders is the importance of storytelling in learning about everything, whether it's about math and science or reading or learning about our history. Storytelling is just really key for that learning.
Yeah. And this blue group is really about that, where that first one was how we relate to everything. This group that's in color-coded with blue is really about how the people sustain and promote culture and language and those things kind of within the community. Number 3 is sharing and generosity, which is a huge piece of what keeps the people together.
Number 4 is a unique one for North Dakota. We love this, and it was not very long after starting to work with the group of elders that we knew we were going to need this, and it's sense of humor. Sense of humor is used in all sorts of ways with the indigenous people in North Dakota, whether it's dealing with grief and death, or it's dealing with just the funny things of life or family. Sense of humor really is something that is very important.
So then we move on to the green section, which is about how we respond to and contribute to all of society, from local to global. So really these are grouped, whereas the blue is about how we relate to each other. The green is about how the indigenous people of North Dakota relate to the rest of the world. Number 5 is about tribal policies, treaties, and sovereignty, and some of the big issues that have impacted the indigenous people of North Dakota historically, and continue to impact them today, both for positive and for negative in some cases.
Another one that is about contributing to society is about Native contributions. Exactly that. This idea that so often as we study this, it gets put into history, it gets put into social studies, and not very many other places, where when we think about Native contributions, there are things happening currently today with leaders from Native communities that are part of business and medicine and education and all sorts of things that are current and are very much contributions to society today.
The last one is on its own. It's kind of the salmon-colored section right at the center of that graphic, and that is Native identity. And that deals with a number of things having to do with things that have been mentioned in others, things like culture, things like ceremony, language, things like that. But really in relation to very much the people right now, today, and how that impacts identities currently. So what we're going to do, that's a quick overview of the categories. We're going to go back through each of the 7, take one each, and we'll give voice to the language of the understanding, and then just share a little bit about our understanding of these understandings, so you'll have a place to kind of begin. So going back to number 1, I'll give voice to that one. Sacred relatives. Native people practice a deep interconnectedness with the land, the resources, the water, all living things, and all human beings. Land stewardship, respect for all two-legged, four-legged, winged, crawlers, and swimmers, and a strong belief in the sacredness of all human beings are key elements for our spirituality. And I would say the key piece to this, I think there are probably two big pieces. One would be interconnectedness, and the second one would be spirituality. And I know in education we're uncomfortable sometimes with spirituality because we want to know how that's being defined. We're concerned about things having to do with our perceived understanding of separation of church and state as we teach. But one of the things that's important about this is the spirituality of indigenous people is not the same as the Western concept of religion or religious practice. And that it really has to do with that interconnectedness, that all things are related, are relative, and that we engage with the other people, certainly, but also plants, animals, even the earth itself, rocks, soil, as a relative, as an interconnected, large living organism. Mm-hmm. And that's a big piece of the spirituality, knowing that I'm part of something that's much, much bigger than myself.
I think also with that, the idea that it's not indoctrination. We talk to teachers a lot about that because they wonder, how is it different to talk about this compared to their own maybe religious beliefs? And I think that's just an important separation to make, that you're not pushing something on anyone. You're sharing about who and what a group of people believe.
And I think we all have to sort through that no matter what it is we teach. Am I helping my students, my learners, to grow into their own understandings in deep ways? Or am I trying to kind of foist upon them something that is my belief? And the first one is what is my definition of teaching. The second one is a good definition for indoctrination. So, yeah.
Number 2, when we go into that learning and storytelling again, traditional teaching and the passing on of knowledge and wisdom was done through storytelling, song, ceremony, and daily way of life, often incorporating specific gender and age-specific responsibilities. These continue to be some of the best modes for learning for both native and non-native learners. I love that this brings in so many different ways of doing that storytelling. We talked about the importance of that, but the fact that there's song and ceremony, and when you think about what happens in the course of a day at school, as often as we can bring those in good and unique ways for learning. Children, I know as an elementary teacher, I used music, I used story as much as I could because it was what sort of gave the hook for the learning, so that it really found a place for them to remember it. And I really appreciate this about the elders sharing that those aspects of learning are so important.
And this is one of the contemporary research around the value of narrative learning through story really supports the things that the elders have known for a long time. So, moving on to number 3, sharing and generosity. Native people have rich traditions of sharing and generosity, which include gifting, shared meals, powwow gatherings, shared living spaces, and care for relatives, including the environment, natural resources, and waters. I don't know how many of the elders share so many stories of both how they have received gifts and support and generosity from their communities, and how they have been encouraged again and again and again to share that from the youngest to the oldest, figuring out what is my responsibility for the community, to be generous, to be sharing, and of course that's what we set up in front of ourselves as something to aspire to practice. And that's just a key piece of the value system, I think,
Yes.
for all the indigenous people in North Dakota for certain.
And part of it is we all find ourselves in need of both of those things.
Right.
In need of somebody being generous to us and sharing with us, and then our ability to offer that when someone else is in need. I mean, those are some basic human needs that we have.
Right.
Sense of humor. This, again, is unique to North Dakota, and I really love it. Native people have a rich history of shared sense of humor that includes teaching stories involving Iktomi, Memegwisi, and Nanaboju. These stories and this unique sense of humor continue to support our resiliency and cohesiveness. These are great. The stories, of course, I think lots of us have heard about the trickster stories and things like that are used especially for teaching children, but people of all ages really, about the things that we should and shouldn't do and what happens when we do things that maybe we shouldn't do. And those are wonderful, but also that sense of humor around, there's been a lot of trauma with this group of people who have lived here longest, and it can be overwhelming. And sometimes using sense of humor to lighten a situation or offer it even as a kindness to if you're in that state of grief or just really having a hard time, when someone you know and love offers something that makes you laugh, that can be one of the best ways of moving out of that grief too.
Well, and the way the elders have shared, the humor is as likely to be heard at a wake or a funeral as it is to be heard in a fun party. It's got a place everywhere among the people. So the next one, number 5, tribal policies and treaties and sovereignty. Native people practice self-determination, developing tribal policies and practicing political activism. Despite a history of U.S. policies and treaties that have often been detrimental, Native people are members of sovereign nations that predate the U.S. government. It's a real challenge. There's a whole lot to learn in this. This is the piece that falls so strongly into that U.S. history piece. And because of that, we know in history there are multiple perspectives. There are perspectives that come from one side, there are perspectives that comes from other side, and then there are probably 5 or 6 more sides or different perspectives to be had. So one of the things that I think is important about this is these are perspectives, becoming aware that there are perspectives among the indigenous people concerning the treaties, concerning these policies that have happened. And there's a way of looking, if we haven't looked at it from that indigenous perspective, we really don't understand the impact of a treaty or a government policy. And recognizing that many have been detrimental in many ways. And that's part of what helps us then going forward. How do we avoid doing that again?
Right. Also, I think in this particular essential understanding is the ability for us to get at the relationship between the reservations, the nations, and the federal government. And we were just working in this school recently where we were talking about this with middle school students, the fact that there are nations within nations. And that's something I think a lot of adults don't understand, that it's not, that a reservation connects or relates to the state first, it relates to the federal government. And that's a very interesting relationship. It's difficult, it's complex, and I think a lot of us really struggle to fully understand what that means. But it's at the heart of how these reservations, these nations function. So when we move on to number 6, Native contributions, Native people continue to contribute to all levels of society, from local to global, in diverse fields including medicine, science, government, education, economics, art, music, and many more. I just feel like that, I was really glad that they wanted to include that, because so often, like we mentioned, it gets pushed into history. Okay, this is great. We have these essential understandings. That'll be really good for our history classes. When actually they need to be brought into any area. You know, it really, whether it's elementary or high school, whether it's reading or math or science or social studies, this needs to be just sort of an infused piece of what we teach because of the place we're from. That's really at the heart of this too. We are living in a certain place, you know, because a lot of people will bring up, well, why don't we have Norwegian essential understandings or German essential understandings where we live? And, you know, there's a lot to learn about those cultures too. But the difference is we are in this place, and it's important for us to know about the place we come from.
Right, right. And to be aware that Indigenous people are active in so many different fields today.
Yes.
And not to relegate them to that stereotype that, you know, Westerns of the 50s kind of gave us. So the final essential understanding is about Native identity. Individual and communal identity is defined and supported by shared Native languages, kinship systems, tioshpai, clan structures, traditional teachings, values, sacred laws, and ceremonies. A continuum of tribal identity unique to each individual ranges from assimilated to traditional lifestyle. There is no generic American Indian. And this is a misunderstanding that I think is really prevalent, that, you know, Indigenous people or Indians are just kind of one colossal thing. This failure to recognize all the diversity, all the uniqueness of all 500 plus nations, languages, cultures that were and in many cases still are present here on this North American continent. Recognizing that, and also recognizing that within the tribe, within the nation, within the indigenous group of people, that there are all kinds of diverse and different perspectives among individuals. That some are practicing very, very traditional lifestyles and very traditional systems and ceremonies and things like that, while others are not. And yet they are still fully indigenous, part of their tribe. They have that heritage. But that's one of those things where we have to understand that they're navigating their individuality and their individual choice on that. So.
And yeah, that's where I think urban and rural come into play. Right. You know, many times if you have the opportunity to live in a reservation community, then you're going to be surrounded by people who maybe are not, you know, fully practicing, but are aware of and to some degree practicing their culture and heritage, where sometimes I feel like what I've heard from Native people living in urban areas, that's harder to not have that place to go to, or just that community of people to come together with. So that can be challenging. You know? So
it seems to me that the job of education is to support all of those individuals in both having access to all of the traditional knowledge and language that they desire to pursue, but also having access to the tools that will help them navigate the broader society when they're away from their traditional culture. How to manage if you go off to university and you are feeling a little bit isolated. How to manage all of that, because those are the individual choices that we have to make as people. So.
Well, next, what we thought we would do to wrap up this particular video with you is to share a video of an elder. And so we're going to share a video of Gladys Hawk, who is from Standing Rock. Gladys passed a couple years ago, but I'm so thankful we have these videos because her wisdom continues to live on through these as different teachers use them and children get to see them and communities gather around her. So we'll share a video.
And this first one really connects in with that number one, with sacred relatives. And so we'll give a listen to this interview with Gladys Hawk from Standing Rock.
As a people everywhere, maybe we should kind of step back and see where we can make it better. Every day there's a train track along where I live. Almost every other day, I see hundreds and hundreds of carloads of coal going east. And I always think, I wonder what they put back in place of that coal, because that's reciprocity. We have to give back what we take from the earth. We're not doing that. And so we're experiencing all of this change, atmospheric changes that's coming. And we believe in a creator who made those for us. And so when we take that belief and we're trying to live that way, and then we see all these new things happening around us, technology, we have to stop and to say, whoa, let's slow down here. What's going on? You know, we have to make some kind of a maybe we have to call on elders to say, what do you think we should do about this? Well, we don't have that kind of technology in our culture to do those kinds of changes. That's all coming. It's already coming, and the scientists are the ones that we should ask them to bring it out in the open. Okay, we're going to cut you off right here. You know, you want oil from the land. Okay, you can do this much. Take so many barrels today and wait another year, you know, but that seems impossible because we need that oil, we need that gas to move, to go to work, to do all of the things that we need to do, even to warm this building. Even our trees are gone. We can't even burn wood anymore. It's against the law. We can't have fires. So what do we do? And so that's the question I will leave, because I don't know the answer.
I just so appreciate her humility in saying, I don't know the answer, but here's the situation. And this particular interview, I think she does such a great job of showing how those traditional perspectives on things fit in with what's going on in contemporary society. She's talking about how elders and scientists can work together to solve some of these problems.
I think about classrooms who could offer that to their students as they're learning, to realize the importance of both the indigenous wisdom and the science that we're learning.
Right.
I think that's a beautiful mix.
Right.
So when we use these videos, there are well over 350 of these video clips on the Teachings of Our Elders website. And one of the things that Scott and I have put together to help teachers and whoever wants to use these to sort of get their thinking started are some questions. And so there are two groups of questions that we have written for each video, and they are simply a jumping off point, something for you to get you started thinking about it and see where it takes you. So when we think about the kinds of questions, one kind of question that we offer is what we call a learn about question. This is where we're just really digging into the content that was shared. It's something that you might research, you might Google it, you might talk to another elder about it, maybe a certain piece of content. So, for example, when Gladys talks about all of the coal going by in trains, maybe researching how much coal does get exported out of North Dakota.
Where's it going?
Those are things you might research. But then we want to also have students and the learner think about it from a very personal standpoint. So would you like to talk about the learn from?
Sure. The learn from questions really are, I think when we came up with this idea, it was our attempt to do what we felt like the elders really wanted, which is not just to give information. but to give something that's transformative. When you traditionally come to an elder and say, I'd like your help with something, I want to know about this, it's because you want to have some part of your life transformed by this bit of wisdom or this story that they're going to share. And so the learn from questions really invite learners, listeners, to make a personal connection. So we'll look at these learn from questions from Gladys's interview, just so you can see what kinds of questions those do. And these aren't the only questions you can make, but we try to help teachers design some of their own learn from questions to help their learners connect deeply. So number one, what do you think should be done to ensure that there are plenty of resources for everyone for all time? Number two, how good am I at conserving resources like electricity, gas, or even food? Number three, what role does technology play in my life? What technologies are helpful to me? Are there any that might not be so helpful? What are they? And four, who do I turn to seek wisdom about difficult decisions? Are they trustworthy? So these are things that might lead to some journaling, might lead to some discussion. We often offer multiple questions, not because we want students to answer every question, but because we want to give them multiple opportunities for connecting. And one may work for this student, a different one may work for this student. And so giving that choice is an important piece of I think, recognizing student agency and choosing what they'd like to pursue.
We really like to frame it as setting up invitations.
Right.
You know, when you have that choice, when you have the ability to choose whether or not you're going to take the invitation, take what you're invited into, that changes how you see it. It changes how you respond to it. And it can become even more personal. If it's something I know, I can take this and do with it what I need to do with it to learn. And we really have enjoyed using these with learners of all ages, whether they're students or adults,
right.
The teachers that we work with. What we hear over and over and over is that is the transformative piece of connecting with these elders. When I can listen to what they have to say and then make that personal connection somewhere in me with something I have experienced or I know about, it makes the learning just all the better.
And then when we sit down
Yes.
to share some of that, and I get to listen to how you connected or how
Right.
this other person connected, it becomes even richer. And it becomes really a way of building community in a classroom or community in a school.
Yes.
Well, we appreciate your time with us. You've gotten a little bit of an introduction to the North Dakota Native American Essential Understandings. We hope you'll continue to pursue that. You can find all of this and so much more at teachingsofourElders.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.